Being a disabled mom was the hardest job that I ever had. And to do it without any kind of support system felt extremely challenging. So Steve and I made the decision to move back to the Midwest, to be closer to family and friends. And I was so fortunate because my parents knew that it would be really, really hard for me to do a 2 to 3 day drive in the car. So they offered to fly Winona and I home. I was ecstatic to move back to Minnesota. But honestly, I was petrified to fly home all by myself with my 3-month-old daughter, wondering how hard it would be with all of my physical limitations. Especially because as a disabled person, it took me 3 times longer to do things than an able-bodied parent. It was May 1st when Steve dropped Winona and I off at the airport. He had grabbed a wheelchair for us and an attendant to ensure that we would make it to the gate safely and would have help to board the plane. And when we got to the gate and we're just waiting for the time to pass before boarding, I knew that Winona needed to have her diaper changed. And so I reluctantly laid her on the airport floor because I knew there was no way I'd be able to do that in a restroom standing at the baby changing station. And I slowly shimmied myself out of the wheelchair and sat on the floor in front of her. And as I unzipped her sleeper and lifted her legs up to change her diaper, I realized that she had had a massive blowout. And as parents, we've all been there, right? And I thought, would be hard enough if I had to deal with this in the comfort of my own home. But instead, I was dealing with this with the eyes of strangers upon us. And it did. It took me a good long while to get her all cleaned up and changed into a whole new outfit sitting there on the airport floor. And then I climbed back into my wheelchair and set her on my lap. And 2 moms had come over to me and said, so sweet. They said, if you need help, you just let us know, and we're happy to help you. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And just like that, I hear over the intercom, flight to Minneapolis is delayed 1 hour. I have about 3 more hours of dealing with my child who is so sick of looking at my face. She is bored, she's starting to squirm. And after the attendant helped us get on the plane and seated us in the aisle seat, I looked at the 2 empty seats next to me and began to silently pray. Please let it be one of those women to sit next to me. Please let my baby not get too fussy. Please do not let it be a man sit next to me. Because my experiences growing up flying, I'd be sitting next to a gentleman and he would get really frustrated with me as a kid. And as I'm thinking about this, and I just keep repeating these thoughts over and over in my head, I feel someone climb over my legs to sit in the seat next to me. And I look to see a gentleman in his mid to late 30s. And I'm like, okay. I just look at Winona and I'm like, okay, thinking to myself, baby girl, we're gonna be good, right? We're gonna stop being fussy. I know you're tired of mama's face. And as we were starting to leave the gate and getting ready for takeoff, I had grabbed a bottle and made it for her, so to try and keep her ears from popping. And I fed it to her. And when I was done, I placed her on my lap so she could just be facing me. And I saw her turn her head, and she locked eyes with the gentleman next to us. And her mouth curved up into the biggest smile she had given all day long. And I look at him, and he's making all of these silly faces to my daughter. She was mesmerized, and so was he. In fact, they spent the next 2 hours making silly faces at one another. And when it was time for me to feed her again and give her another bottle as we were getting ready to land, he says to me, "Would you mind if I fed her?" And I said, "Well, sure, but I should warn you, she erupts like Old Faithful sometimes." He said, "That's okay. I have 2 daughters, but they're teenagers now, and I really miss these days." I'm telling you, that man was my angel in the sky that day. And if I must be honest, I had misdiagnosed him. I had him all figured out before he even sat next to me on the plane. We do that often. In fact, psychology today states that we have our first impressions of someone all figured out within the first 7 seconds of seeing them. Angry, flaky, stubborn. The list can go on and on of the negative things that we can think about another person. But if we don't acknowledge that, we'll never be able to make that change to start thinking and being more open-minded to others.